start. Should be a little timer in that corner there.
All right.
So if you can, just see if it's framed right. All right, so we're gonna go through a couple of slides. I'm gonna try to talk loud so you guys can hear me too, in case you wanna absorb any of this content. We're gonna talk about Fix-A-Flat and bike maintenance tips, both for high performance, like what you can do to make sure your bike is working to its fullest, and then also just general tips of things you should be doing frequently with your bike that you might not be doing. Will really make sure things are working properly. So we're going to skip through the introduction portion. I think we kind of did this in prior clinics. But I'm Coach Chris. I've got Coach Rob as well. We've both been doing triathlons for quite some time. I don't know, 15 years for me, I think about. I don't know how many, like 9 years. So a lot of experience between just the two of us, but our other coaches too have a lot of experience as well. So most important thing I'll always cover anytime we do a clinic, especially outdoors, you can come on in to throw your bike maybe on the back trainer here. Is every clinic we do outdoors, if we're riding as a group, which we will start doing in a couple of weeks outside, make sure you have a helmet. Number one, or we won't let you ride. We always have someone who shows up the first outdoor ride and forgets their helmet.
So take pictures of why you need a helmet, I will give them to you.
Yeah, if you want to see people who end up in the hospital because they haven't been wearing helmets, it's a scary thing. Also, make sure you have Fix-A-Flat gear, like the equipment, and that's what we'll cover a lot today. Just the little things you might want to have in your saddle bag, most importantly. So today, last week we covered the basic like bike gear questions. This week we're covering more bike maintenance and Fix-A-Flat. And at the end of today, we'll have a Fix-A-Flat challenge. So if anybody wants to take part, the winner will get a TriMonster mini backpack. So we'll time you guys to see. I forget when I tried to do it last year. I think my record was like 1 minute and 36 seconds. But if you can do it under 2 minutes, that's really impressive. I usually say the goal for most people is to be able to do it under 10 minutes. In a race situation, you want to try to be able to do it under 5 minutes. But if you can do it under 10, that's really good. If you're under 5, you're like, you can start practicing to become a pro team support person. Yeah, if you ever watch a professional bike race, you'll see all they do is they take a spare wheel. So they literally just take one wheel off, throw the other one on, and send you on your way.
If you want to ride with a spare wheel, you'll save yourself some time.
I'm not going to cover triathlon rules like drafting. We touched on that a little bit last week, but we'll also cover that in training more. But just if you aren't aware, there are rules in triathlon, and usually most of the races we do are non-draft legal. That just means you can't ride right behind somebody. You get close, you have to pass. You can't drop back. You actually have to pass them first. Chicago Tri, there's a cool video. I'll post this in our Facebook group. If you're doing the Chicago Tri for the first time, want to see what the bike course looks like. I actually recorded the bike course on my bike camera. I got permission from Chicago Tri last year to do it, because they changed the course a little bit. So now, like in the past, this is what it looked like. You were actually riding on the inner lanes going north, and then on the inner lanes going south. Now they shut it down, so all the riders are going north and south on a completely shut down Lakeshore Drive. So there's no longer cars driving alongside. So all the cars are on the east side, we're all on the west side. Which is so, checklist. So we covered this. I just wanted to highlight it real quick. Number one, if you're joining us for Saturday workouts, especially outdoors, make sure your bike is tuned up and working before you bring it for the first ride. You know, make sure your gears are shifting, your tires aren't flat, that sort of thing. Besides a helmet, I also recommend sunglasses and maybe a bike lock too. Sometimes people like to go out afterwards and grab food. So if you don't have like a small bike lock, that might be something to look at. But the big thing you should have is some type of saddle bag on the back of your bike. So mine is this little guy here, where you can have all your spare equipment that you might need. So So I'll go over that in a second. The main pieces are CO2, so compressed air cartridges, or a bike pump, like a small bike pump. I actually have, when I go riding, instead of using CO2, I have this little tiny mini hand pump. And I can just shove it in my jersey back pocket. You don't need like a giant one. Sometimes they make bigger ones for your bike frame that you can just attach to your bike frame. Those are fine too. But this is always a nice thing to have. You know, I might not race with this because I don't want to carry a lot of extra weight. But if you're just training and riding, this is always a good thing to have. And then at least one spare tube or two spare tubes. For those of you who are like racing and competitive and maybe don't want to carry a lot of spare tubes, what you could get is a thinner, lighter spare tube. So I actually carry in my triathlon bike, the blue one in the back there, you'll see the saddlebag is really small. It looks like it's only maybe about this big, or like two of these. But I actually have two spare tubes in there, a CO2, tire levers, a spare chain link, a mini tool, just to like have a really, really small version. And if you want that for tubes, butyl tubes are ones that are usually really thin. They're lighter, sometimes a little bit more expensive, but you can fit two of them in about the space of this one. They can really get compacted down for size. So if you don't like having a big saddlebag on the back of your bike, there are ways to get smaller equipment. And then a patch kit. So there's different types of patch kit. I always like to recommend having one, simply because if you have a tube that just gets a small puncture, sometimes you can just put a patch on it, and that's all you need. You don't need to replace it with a full spare tube. So in like a race situation, you might want to do a full spare tube, but if you're out on the road, just having a patch kit can sometimes be enough that you use. So pulling out of this saddlebag that I have, this is one of them that I like, the slime ones, the green. They're just a little sticky, kind of like a sticker, basically. It sticks really well on the rubber, so if there's a small hole in your tube, you can just take one of these out, put it on that hole, pump it back up, and it'll generally hold the air. Sometimes you'll still have like a slow leak, so it's not perfect. But if you don't have any spare tubes, it's better to have one of these than not. And a little pack like this could have like 8 to 10 of them in there. So it's kind of like 8 to 10 spare tubes. So usually I carry one spare tube and then one patch kit. And I actually like to keep my spare tubes in a Ziploc bag, because if you put a mini tool or tire levers in your saddlebag and everything's crunched in there tight, there's a sharp edge that might actually puncture your tube. And usually, once you put it in a little Ziploc baggie, it slides in and out a little bit easier, so it doesn't catch on things as much. Other people like to actually put baby powder in the little baggie, because then it keeps the tube dry, and it's easier to get it in and out than if it's a little bit sticky in terms of sticking to your tire or sticking to your wheel well, the rim of the bike as well. And then I always recommend cycling gloves, at least for training. I personally don't race triathlon wearing gloves. Some people do. If you're worried about falling, if the weather is wet, it might be good to have them. If you're doing longer distance, just for comfort, having that extra padding is good. But also for fixing a flat tire, gloves are great, because as you try to get the tire back on, sometimes having a little padding so you don't wear down your own skin makes it a lot more comfortable. So if you want to really put your elbow into it, it's nice to have that. So those are kind of like the basic essentials that we usually recommend having. So a patch kit, a spare tube, the tire levers, there's all different kinds. Yeah, the patch kit. Tire levers come in many shapes and sizes. These are the bigger ones, but I love these, the Pedros ones, because they're very sturdy. You can really, some of the smaller ones can break a little bit easier, but these are really, really strong and sturdy. So those are the ones that I like. Most bike shops will have those. Little black ones, same thing. And then some type of mini tool is also helpful. Just like a tool that's got a little Allen wrench, a couple of spare tools. You can get a bigger one that even has a chain breaker, so if you break a chain, you can actually break off the broken link and reattach a good link and get back on the road again. But just the basic tools are good. And then a CO2 cartridge of some kind, that's the compressed air. And if you have a CO2 cartridge, you also want what's called a CO2 valve adapter. And that's what actually lets you use the CO2 cartridge. So some type, they're all different kinds. But these are usually like 15, 20 bucks. And they usually will come with one CO2 cartridge. If any of you guys have like deep rim racing wheels, another good thing to get are valve extenders. So if you don't have tubes with deep enough rims, like Kinnear's got the deep rim zip wheels, he might not be able to use just a standard tube on his wheels because the valve stem of that tube might not be long enough. But if you have regular wheels, you guys, first timers don't need to worry about that. That's more the very expensive racing wheels. The other thing I like to have, a little bit of sunscreen in case you get stuck on the side of the road sitting in the sun. And I like to keep these are Grease Monkey wipes, hand wipes, that can cut grease off your hand very easily. So if you tend to have a greasy bike that you haven't cleaned in a while, your hands can get very greasy. So I like to have those. I don't have them when I race, but general training, I do use those. And then, what else do I have? Oh, so the other thing I like to put in, I'll just show you guys these too. I always keep, even when I'm racing generally, a spare of latex or vinyl gloves. So if you don't want to get your hands dirty, these are great. The other reason I have these is because if the weather is very cold and I forgot to bring gloves, these can actually block the wind completely. So even though they don't have insulation, it can really keep you warm if it's wet or cold outside. So I've done a couple races where it's like 40 degrees and it starts raining and you're just like freezing. One time my hands completely froze. I couldn't move my fingers. And I'm like, what am I gonna do? It was the start of an Ironman. I was like 5 miles in and I literally couldn't like keep my hands warm. I put 2 hands on top of each other on one aero bar just to like try to stay warm. And then I finally reminded myself, I'm like, I've got these in my saddlebag. So I pull over and I literally couldn't even like put them on. My hands were so cold. But once I did, that saved my whole day. And that was actually my Ironman PR. I had my best race after that, so a lifesaver. And I brought a whole bunch. I have some of the blue ones here, which is what you generally see in bike mechanic shops. I also have black ones over there. Black ones you won't be able to see where the grease is, but they don't look as dirty, but whatever color doesn't matter. But if you want to, feel free. You can grab some of these today if you want, or from this box over there. Just shove them in your saddlebag. All right, so we're going to cover a couple of maintenance tips and then we'll finally get to the fix-a-flat. If you have questions, let me know. I always say do the ABC check. Really easy to remember. Air. So people don't realize this, but your tubes on your bike will permeate air. The particle size of nitrogen, oxygen, all that, depending on the tube you have, the molecules will come out of the tube overnight. Typically it'll only drop a little bit, like maybe 10 psi overnight, probably 20 psi after 2 nights. But after like a couple weeks, if you've left your bike somewhere and you come back to it and you're like, oh no, it's completely flat, I must have a puncture. No, it's just the air has gotten out over time. So realize that, and particularly if any of you guys use a CO2 cartridge, the compressed air are a completely different type of particle than the air we breathe. And the particle size is smaller. So even by the next day, the tire might be completely flat. So oftentimes people fix a flat tire and then the next morning it's like flat again. They're like, oh man, I have another puncture. And no, it's just that you use CO2. So if you use a CO2 cartridge, the next day, make sure that you replace that air and pump it back up. And so if you only pump up a little bit, you might notice like 2 days later, it's getting flatter again. So again, that compressed air is coming out. So just be aware of that. But for performance, for race day, you should always be pumping up your tire ideally the day of or the day before, because you will generally lose 10 or 20 kg